I was actually invited to testify in front of Congress, in front of the Defense Appropriations Committee. And the night before I testified, I got a call from the committee saying that at least 10 of the most powerful private war companies in the United States had called the committee and demanded that I not testify. And then they said, well, okay, if he's going to testify, then one of our lobbyists has to appear. You know, their lobbyists are constantly on Capitol Hill. I've been there like 3 times in my life. And so Jim Moran, a Democrat from Virginia, very bravely said to them, no, we're going to do this and we're going to have this hearing. And so we had that hearing, and it was web streamed. C-SPAN, of course, didn't cover it. And the only people in the room besides the Democrats on the committee was one lone Republican congressman. The Republicans boycotted, Jack Kingston, the single most conservative member of the Congress from Georgia. And he and I got into an argument about the religious right. He was very offended at my characterization of Eric Prince as a radical right-wing Christian. He said that's him too. And on one side of the room is like me and a handful of other people, and then on the other side of the room is all the industry lobbyists from Titan and Khaki and Blackwater, and they have a trade association, all of them together. It's called the International Peace Operations Association. I wish it was a joke, but it's this Orwellian thing, and its logo is a cartoon sleeping lion, like something from a Disney movie or something. All right, well, I'm being told here that I have to wrap up. I feel like I didn't even start my talk yet. I guess I'll close in saying this. Those 4 guys that got killed in Fallujah, the Iraqis had turned 2 football fields into mass graves, and he described the smell of death that had overtaken the city. And so this collective punishment was meted out against the people of Fallujah over the deaths, not of 4 U.S. soldiers, not of 4 U.S. civilians, but of 4 mercenaries sent there by a private and politically connected company. And the families of those 4 men, like so many thousands of American families, went through a process of trying to figure out what had happened to their loved ones. And they discovered that Blackwater, they said, wasn't being transparent with them, wasn't being straightforward. And at one point, one of the mothers of one of those guys killed says she was told by a Blackwater representative that if she wanted to see the company's investigation of their murder, that she would have to sue the company. Her son was killed. Her son had been in the military and special forces. All of them were special forces. You'll have to sue us if you want to know why your son was killed and what the circumstances were, because they weren't in armored vehicles. They were sent out short to men, and they didn't have heavy weaponry on them. And so these families, after being told this, decide in January of 2005, we're going to take Blackwater up on their challenge and we're going to sue Blackwater. So they filed a groundbreaking wrongful death lawsuit against Blackwater. It sent shivers and shockwaves through the war industry. Blackwater enlisted a high-powered team of attorneys. The original lawyer on the case was Fred Fielding, who's now Bush's White House counsel, defending him against scandaldom. More recently, it was Kenneth Starr. They've had 5, 6 different law firms representing them on this, all of them high-powered Republican law firms. And these families have their 2 lawyers from Santa Ana, California, and they're fighting Blackwater. And Blackwater hasn't made much, and I'll wrap up in a second, Blackwater hasn't made much of disputing the specific allegations of the families that their men were sent in unarmored vehicles, short to men without heavy weaponry. Instead, Blackwater put forward a very novel defense. They said, we can't be sued. And the reason Blackwater said it can't be sued is because Donald Rumsfeld recognized Blackwater as part of the U.S. total force, the U.S. war machine. And we should be entitled to the same immunity from civilian litigation for wrongful death enjoyed by the U.S. military. At the same time Blackwater made that argument, the company's high-paid lobbyists were waxing poetic in the media about how it would be inappropriate to apply the Uniform Code of Military Justice to Blackwater forces because we're civilians. So when it's convenient, we should get the immunity of the military, and when it's convenient, we should get the protection of civilians from being prosecuted in the court-martial system. And Blackwater was rejected at every level. They tried to get it thrown out, failed. They tried to get it removed to federal court, failed. Ken Starr twice appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and even though John Roberts is the Chief Justice, and it's a Republican-dominated Supreme Court, twice the Supreme Court rejected it. So that trial was set to begin this past May. At the 11th hour, you have all this maneuvering happening behind the scenes. This was going to be the trial of the war. It was going to put the war contractor system on trial, public forum, jury in a state court in North Carolina, right in Blackwater's backyard. A jury of the peers was going to decide whether or not Blackwater was liable for the deaths of those 4 men, and then responsible for what comes after it, if you think about it. But at the last moment, Blackwater goes to a senior judge, almost retired in the Eastern District of North Carolina, and somehow gets him to cast aside the rejections of the Supreme Court, to cast aside the rejections of the Fourth Circuit, to cast aside the rejections of the state court, and they get him to order the case into private arbitration, where there will not be witnesses in the same way, it won't be open to the public, and the decision will likely be sealed. And what's perhaps most important is that there will be a gag imposed on those families from talking about it. And so it appears right now that Blackwater was able finally, after 2 years of battling this, to remove it from a public forum. And what they've done in an act of extraordinary cynicism is Blackwater USA, the powerful war contractor connected to the Bush White House, has filed a counterclaim against the estates of those 4 dead men, seeking $10 million in damages. Blackwater says that the lawsuit violated their contracts that they signed that said they wouldn't sue Blackwater. And so now they're going to punish the estates, $10 million counterclaim against them. Now these families have put up a defense fund to keep the case alive. So they're at the one hand trying to fight this war contractor, and on the other hand now facing the fact that the estates of their deceased sons and husbands are now being sued for $10 million by this powerful war contractor. I'm happy to answer questions, and I want to end on this note, that I think we, and I feel like I've said this a number of times at this very conference, but it's true every single year. We live in very dark times. We live in very violent and vicious and bloody times. I just got back from Bolivia. I was there for 2 weeks, and I've never in my life seen a country where the disparity between the haves and the have-nots is so stark. Bolivia has the largest percentage of indigenous population of any country in the world, and it's insane because you have the rich in Bolivia building themselves into these communities they call urbanizaciones, and they have their private security companies guarding the perimeter. And now the indigenous populations of Bolivia are becoming like the scorned street art that no one wants. They've been forced into the cities to try to make some kind of money for themselves. And you have this incredible disparity between the rich and the poor, and it's a country that is truly ripe for an outright revolution. Now, the Evo Morales thing is very complicated, but Bolivia is ripe for an outright revolution. And the reason I say that after saying we live in dark times is because I found it incredible. When you talk to so many indigenous Bolivians, the incredible spirit, it took them over 500 years to have an indigenous leader rise to power in that country. And whether people like him or not, there's a pride that the conquistadors are no longer running the presidency of Bolivia. And it's moments like that, and it's the kind of people that we meet at this conference that give me great hope that we can win. And you know what? It's not all about winning. I was just talking to a friend tonight and remembering the quote that I've mentioned before here, and I'll end on this, of Ammon Hennessy, the great anarchist who was protesting in front of the White House. He had been a World War I draft resistor, a war resistor. And a newsman came up to him and says, you know, Mr. Hennessy, you're not going to change them, the men in the White House. And he goes, that might be true, but they're sure as hell not going to change me. Thank you very much.